Ja, so, dann schauen wir mal. Wo wir gestern hängen geblieben sind. Okay, das geht nicht auf.
Wait, is that a dead Combine soldier?
Yeah. When you guys were off stealing the reactor, I saw the Combine moving supplies in here. So, I guess they're interested in this place again.
Right, we'll keep an eye out. Something's definitely up. Alyx, manhack! Watch out!
See it. Ow!
Es ist natürlich blöd, dass ich da nur eine Kugel drin gehabt habe.
Last shelf. Okay, so right now, what it's like to live on Earth on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say we're at a 2.
Yep, could always get worse.
What would you rate it before the Combine showed up?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I don't know. Good day? I'd say 6. Yeah, strong 6.
6? That's not great.
Now, that's life, Alyx. You know, it's not always great.
Well, maybe we get the Combine off Earth and we could shoot for like an 8, you know?
Ooh, an 8. Yeah, that really would be nice. Really nice.
building a Half-Life game, we try to start playtesting as soon as we can, even when we only have 10 or 15 minutes of gameplay built. We find it extremely helpful to see how players are reacting to what we've made as soon as possible. One of the major ways playtesting impacted Half-Life Alyx was in revealing how players reacted to the density of interactive elements in the world. Before we begin, we were already aware that players would likely spend more time paying attention to the details of the world around them in VR, but we were unprepared for how significant this would be. Seeing some players spend 30 minutes messing around with a single interactive object really opened our eyes. As a result of those playtesting observations, we spend much of our development time focusing on the environment around the player and the level of details and interactivity to be found there. It might seem surprising that we didn't start with the assumption that we wouldn't need to spend that amount of time on the world, but the reality of game development is that we always have a finite amount of time to build a game and we're always making trade-offs. In the ideal case, we spend our finite time on whatever contributes the most to the player's experience. So, playtesting early and thereby getting a better sense of what elements are contributing to the player experience help us understand where to spend the limited time we have. In this case, those early playtests told us to significantly increase the amount we should budget for creating the world details and interactivity.
Oh, holy ish.
Barnacles are a unique enemy type in Half-Life Alyx in that they are static and often situated above the player's natural view direction. During testing in confined or dimly lit spaces, we often saw players walk into barnacle tongues without noticing them. One way we addressed this was with audio. In particular, we made idle barnacles emit subtle breathing, croaking, and grumbling sounds like the following. These sounds helped alert players to the presence of barnacles, and also made them seem like living creatures that were always active, not just a mechanical piece of gameplay that responded only to the player's actions. The head-related transfer functions available in Steam Audio were especially helpful, as they made it possible to accurately spatialize barnacle sounds so that the players could tell that the sounds were coming from above.
Early incarnations of manhacks were frustrating to fight in VR, since their audio was not providing enough information about their location. They seemed to appear from nowhere, and even when close to the player, they lacked a dramatic presence. We tried a variety of layered sounds with varying distance fall-offs, but this often created more confusion, especially when multiple manhacks were nearby. Our ultimate solution to the problem consisted of two parts. The first was to make manhacks emit the following alarm-like warning sound when they first came into range or were deployed by a Combine soldier. The second part of our solution was to add more aggressive looping sounds with short fall-off distances. The short fall-off of these sound loops meant that this specific component of manhack's sound treatment would only be audible quite near the player. Thus, when players heard these sounds, they knew that manhacks had begun hunting them, and one or more was getting close enough to be of concern.
Maniacs!
Goodness.
Attention, please. Access to this block is not permitted. Local security deployed and designated to prosecute.
Before Final Art was added, the cramped dark area of this level did not take players very long to traverse. But as the fidelity of the game increased, players spent more and more time getting to this point. As we've learned over the years, too much time in dark underground areas can become fatiguing to players, and this is even more significant in VR. This outdoor section provides a change of pace and a brief respite from the dark. Not only does it give players something visually different and interesting to look at, it allows them to clearly see and assess threat in open space, allowing them to get some easy kills with a little stress. It was also important to provide some variety here, as players are about to head into a dark area that requires precision shooting and flashlight usage.
anymore.
Access to this block is not permitted. To receive this message is to be in civil code violation.
No. Später, nicht jetzt. Ah.
I'm out. So, when we get the Combine off of Earth, what are you gonna do?
I'm going full production mode on the Russells, of course.
Oh, of course. You'll be sitting on a landmine.
Gold mine, yep. So here's the plan. Conservative estimate, I figure 1 year to get the world unconquered by the Combine, get them off the planet, so that's year 1, then another year to mass produce the Russells. Although, just quietly, we will need to rebuild society first, you know, to get some basic infrastructure, jobs, money, that sort of thing. Otherwise people won't be able to buy them, you know. So, yeah, 3-year plan. Let's slot the infrastructure thing in for year 2.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You're gonna want to put that in here too.
This section, with a multitude of explosive barrels embedded in Zen overgrowth, was designed to switch up player expectations and change the pacing of the level. Prior to this point in the game, explosive barrels and canisters were used as offensive weapons. In this space, they're deadly to the player. This section, with a multitude of explosive barrels embedded in Zen overgrowth, was designed to switch up player expectations and change the pacing of the level. Prior to this point in the game, explosive barrels and canisters were used as offensive weapons. In this space, they're deadly to the player. If a barrel or canister does explode, it sets off a fatal chain reaction. This change in priority forces players to aim carefully and adds intensity without combat. This has the positive side effect of training players to utilize the pistol even more effectively. While the automatic alignment of the flashlight with a braced weapon is useful in direct combat, in this section we observed players taking advantage of the decoupled weapon and flashlight as they illuminated and targeted barnacles in the intricate Zen foliage overhead.
Whoa, careful, careful!
Oh boy. Getting dark again. Last mag.
We decided early on that the environments we wanted to portray in Half-Life Alyx would benefit from an investment in high-quality volumetric lighting. This component of illumination is an indispensable tool, not just for creating atmosphere, but for drawing the player's attention to critical gameplay elements. Our system works in 3 phases. In the first phase, illumination from static light sources is captured in a 3-level hierarchical volumetric clip map surrounding the player. The highest resolution level of this clip map measures 1 cubic inch per voxel. The clip map is updated incrementally, less than once per frame, as the player moves throughout the scene. In the second phase, a compute shader ray marches in view space throughout the clip maps, accumulating static lighting, dynamic lighting, and volumetric extinction. The ray marching is performed every frame and employs temporal anti-aliasing to improve quality. In the final phase, we resample lighting and volumetric scattering from the prior phase for each eye once per frame. The result is a texture that describes, for any given view space depth, volumetric scattering and extinction, which we apply during forward rendering.
Last one. Out of shells. I'm out.
Das hätte ich mir aber denken können.
Where we're next. Last mag.
Alyx? Alyx!
Was ist denn? Hä? Ja, vorne liegt eh was, oder?
Out on mags.
Alyx? Alyx, you still there?
Aber du nervst, Junge.
Wait, is that a dead Combine soldier?
Yeah. When you guys were off stealing the reactor, I saw the Combine moving supplies in here. So, I guess they're interested in this place again.
Right, we'll keep an eye out. Something's definitely up. Alyx, manhack, watch out!
See it. Okay, so right now, what it's like to live on Earth on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say we're at a 2.
Yep, could always get worse.
What would you rate it before the Combine showed up?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I don't know. Good day? I'd say 6. Yeah, strong 6.
6? That's not great.
Well, that's life, Alyx. You know, it's not always great.
Well, maybe we get the Combine off Earth and we could shoot for like an 8, you know?
Ooh, an 8. Yeah, that really would be nice. Really nice. Plan hack!
Attention, please. Access to this block is not permitted. Local security deployed and designated to prosecute.
Stay calm.
So, when we get the Combine off of Earth, what are you gonna do?
I'm going full production mode on the Russells, of course.
Oh, of course. You'll be sitting on a landmine.
Gold mine, yep. So here's the plan. Conservative estimate, I figure 1 year to get the world unconquered by the Combine, get them off the planet, so that's year 1. Then another year to mass produce the Russells. Although, just quietly, we will need to rebuild society first, to get some basic infrastructure, jobs, money, that sort of thing. Otherwise people won't be able to buy them, So, 3-year plan. Let's slot the infrastructure thing in for year 2.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You're gonna want to put that in year 2. Oh boy. Getting dark again.
Oh, careful, careful!
So, this whole 3-year Russell plan. You think you'd have a job for me?
Job? Alyx, you invented the Alyx. Of course you can have a job.
We could be partners.
Oh, well, Well, there would be stock options. 5 to 10 year vesting period, obviously. Could be very lucrative for you, Alyx, in the long term.
I don't know what any of that meant, but sounds good, partner.
Yep, sounds good. Alyx?
Combine. Russ, these guys have automatic weapons.
They're alien commandos. Of course they have automatic weapons. We'd have them too, but Combine weapons are gene-coded, so out of luck. Unless you find one that's unbonded, or you're open to some minor genetic modification.
I'm good, Russ. I'm just gonna roll with these genes that I've got.
We always introduce new enemies at a distance, and never while the player is under duress. Here, the player is able to observe the Combine soldiers killing some wandering zombies, giving the player an idea of how powerful the soldiers are, and how they might operate in combat. We located the Combine far enough away that it was plausible that they would not notice the player, but close enough that the player could choose to engage, but remain relatively safe from return fire.
Wow, my gun's looking pretty good.
Russ, come on. At this point, it's kind of our gun.
The first encounter with a Combine soldier caused a number of issues in playtesting. The biggest one was that players were often surprised when the soldiers started shooting at them. Some players who were new to the Half-Life series had no idea who these soldiers were. But it's also been hours of game time since players saw another human, and we found that many players weren't willing to immediately start shooting. Some players also wondered why Alyx moved so quickly to killing other humans. This area was designed to demonstrate that Combine soldiers are hostile and will attack on sight, giving the player a reason to want to shoot back. It starts with the dialogue preceding the encounter, where the player overhears the Combine discussing the problem of scavengers in the quarantine zone. Then, when the player finally achieves visual contact with their first Combine soldier, they witness that soldier in the process of executing a civilian scavenger.
Squad's Soldier AI has been a mainstay of the Half-Life series, so we were excited to see how their design would be impacted by the move to VR. Our early playtesting against a Half-Life 2 Combine Soldier AI in VR immediately made a number of things clear. First, players did not like to be shot at, and often had a visceral, negative response. The soldiers frequently ran at players at full speed, firing all the while, and we discovered that the speed of Half-Life 2 combat was simply too overwhelming in VR. Also, players took longer to do everything in VR. especially the core action of spotting and aiming their weapon at an enemy while staying in cover. As a result, the soldiers tended to live much longer in VR than they did in Half-Life 2. It was clear from these early playtests that the most common reaction among players was to immediately seek cover from enemy fire. So we started experimenting with changes to the soldier AI, aimed at building a combat experience around players' tendency to seek cover. Early experiments were focused on keeping Combine soldiers at a comfortable distance from the player, while keeping them moving around enough to not have combat become too static. To create lulls in firing for players to peek out from cover, we prevented soldiers from shooting while on the run in most cases. To keep players from remaining stationary, we created a concept of flushing, where squads will attempt to flush the player out of cover, and we gave each class of soldier a different method of flushing out the player. But even in these early tests, it was also clear that players weren't capable of fighting soldiers until they'd gotten skilled in a number of basic combat actions, like reloading their gun without having to focus all their attention on it. So we were careful to slowly introduce the various types of soldiers, and even individual features within the soldier classes. For example, these early fights against Combine soldiers only feature the basic grunts, and these particular grunts don't carry grenades. This means they don't actually have the capability to flush a player out of cover. We found it was important in these first fights to give players all the time they need to learn to use cover effectively, before we start introducing enemies that could try and flush them out.
There's a control station override nearby. You should have plenty of time to get the override back online. Alright, I'll be able to stop the train right here.
You sure you can do that?
Absolutely. You just need to activate the terminal.
Nice.
Then you'll need to be ready for a fight. They're not going to give up your dad easily.
I'll be ready.
Right, that's the terminal there.
I'm on it.
Do hurry, though. Yeah, there must be a battery around here somewhere.
Four shells left.
maybe it's missing a piece. Okay, no worries. But the train is coming. Just get me in. It'll only take a second. You're doing great.
Yep, doing great. No worries. 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 No worries.
Okay, now just re-engage the system.
Is it supposed to come off?
It's the opposite of what it's supposed to do, Alyx.
What do I do now?
Well, don't panic. Well, stop panicking if you
I'm
are.
not panicking.
Yes, but I am. We need to find another way to stop this train.
There's gotta be another way to stop this train.
Well, start looking. We don't have much time. 10 seconds, Alyx.
At this point in the game, we knew we needed a big set piece, a non-combat moment to reward players for fighting their way through the dark, scary tunnels. Not only that, but the pace of the story was leading up to its most important moment thus far, the rescue of Eli Vance. Crashing the Combine prison train that was transporting Eli felt like the exact right thing to accomplish these goals, and it gave us the opportunity to create some VR spectacle. We wanted to achieve the cinematic chaos of causing a train wreck, while giving the players an active role in the event. Our first attempts to design the scenario were a challenge. It turned out that directing the players' attention wasn't as simple as ensuring they were in the right position through gameplay. In our initial tests, players frequently failed to see some or all of the spectacular train wreck. The crash was one of the first destruction sequences we put into the game, so we had a lot to learn about player behavior in VR and how to direct the player naturally to immerse them in the chaos. On top of that, to continually hit our target frame rate, we needed to create a cascading series of events, so that only some of the destruction was happening at any given time. Sound design, level design, effects, and animation had to be carefully coordinated to lead the player's attention through each stage of the wreck. For example, at the start of the crash, we used the sounds of train cars piling up in the distance, encouraging players to look in that direction before one of the train cars lifts up and blasts through the concrete connector. At the end of the sequence, the smokestack collapse is used to direct the player's attention to their eventual path forward, and we wanted players to witness its destruction. Before bringing down the smokestack, we gave players a brief moment of rest, and, again, used sound to draw their attention to the smokestack. Initially, we used a rumbling sound preceding its collapse, but we found this to be too subtle in practice, and instead added the transient explosion sound, which drew the player's attention towards the smokestack more reliably.
What the hell are those?
I don't know, but we need to find Dad.
Yeah, no, I know. I've just never seen those before. That's your dad's prisoner pod.
Oh my god. Dad! Okay, I'm gonna reach
For
out
the
and
rescue of Eli, we wanted to create a tense, just out of reach moment where the player physically saves him. But for the rest of the story to work, Alyx and Eli had to take different paths at the end of the scene. We tried a few different approaches, including a version where Eli was hanging from a ledge just in front of the player, and the player could reach down to attempt to grab Eli's hand to pull him up. In practice, however, players' hands would collide with the real-world floor. Not only did this make it impossible to reach Eli, it took players out of the moment, wrecking the emotion of the scene. Since Eli and Alyx had to take different paths, we tried an approach where Alyx rescued Eli, but he was injured and couldn't proceed. Unfortunately, many players would stick around, not wanting to abandon him. Eventually, we arrived at the solution that shipped in the final product. Separating Eli from the player with the Vortigaunt's rescue made for a much more meaningful return and fulfillment of the Vortigaunt's promise to help Alyx. The datapod that Eli found was an addition that not only let us integrate Eli back into the story later, but also gave him something to do, so there was a much stronger reason why he would not accompany the player on their journey going forward.
Yes! Look to the star, got it. Dad?
It's right in the middle of the QZ, and it's big. Get above ground and see what you can find.
I will accompany the Eli there and ensure his safety.
Great. Thank you. Dad, I'm gonna go find this vault.
Go! Stay safe, baby. I love you.
I love you too.
I love you too.
Thank you. Hey, Russ. Keep an eye out for Dad, okay?
I'll let you know if he gets here. When he gets here.
You know, it got a bit messy back there, but we did get Dad back.
Yeah.
What?
That's probably gonna draw some attention. Not probably, actually. It's definitely drawing attention. Look, they're looking for you now, okay? So just be careful. You know, if we can get this weapon, we could change things forever.
Yeah. If.
Look, I know we've only been working together for a few hours now, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. Okay, you're under a lot of pressure here.
Wow. Russ.
So much pressure, in fact, that I hesitate to even bring it up. But I did notice that when you reached out for your father's hand, had he actually grabbed it, his grip would have crushed all the delicate sensors in the Russells.
Ah. Okay.
Totally understandable, and would have been worth it, by the way, in this case.
Right.
Having said that, I have a hard time imagining another situation where that would have been the case. And much like your father, the Russells are priceless. Okay, so just, moving forward.
Russ, I promise your gloves are safe with me. Last 2 shells.
Early on in the project, we spent some time experimenting with the classic Half-Life crowbar. Playtests showed us that it was an interesting tool for our player to use in puzzles and world interactions, but we weren't very happy with how our melee combat efforts turned out. We felt it was really important that the crowbar was solid to the world and enemies, and that resulted in some tricky physics challenges. Players could easily push the crowbar into an enemy in front of them, because nothing in the real world would stop it. Indeed, without that real-world physical feedback, we found playtesters exhibited a wide variety of swing behaviors. Some would waggle the controller rapidly, others would put their whole body into it. At the same time, playtest response to our pistol prototype was very positive, especially around the more complex reloading mechanics. Faced with a potentially significant R&D problem in melee combat, we chose to refocus our efforts on ranged combat. It also didn't help that players all associated the crowbar with Gordon Freeman, not Alyx Vance.
Alyx, look out the window.
Holy crap. That's gotta be the vault.
Yeah. Your dad didn't mention it was floating.
So even if we make it there, we still have to get up to it.
Oh, the cables! Look at all the cables attached to it. All we have to do is follow them.
And break whatever's at the other end.
And down comes the vault. Simple, easy to follow. Yeah, I like this plan.
This entire section of the map, from the start of the keycard puzzle up to this room, was added specifically to show the player the vault on its own. Without this little detour, players would otherwise have their first view of the vault at the entrance to the Northern Star Hotel, which was also when they would see their first Combine substation. So much new information all at once led many players to confuse the vault with the substation, or just miss it entirely, so we created this area of the train station to highlight the vault on its own. Even though players are required to enter this room to get the second keycard, they still wouldn't necessarily notice the vault outside. So we added some dialogue with Russell about looking out the window. To see it. This may be a bit heavy-handed, but it was necessary to solve the problem of players not recognizing the vault when they saw it later in the game.
Have you heard any Combine chatter about Dad escaping?
No, nothing. It's all about sending reinforcements into the quarantine zone.
On the plus side, that means Dad is still on his way back to you. We'd have heard if they recaptured Eli Vance.
And on the downside...
Getting to the vault isn't going to get any easier. Ooh, grenades. Total waste of grenade.
Worth it.
Agreed. Heads up, zombie. Look out.
Although it may seem obvious that throwing would be a trivial interaction to support in VR, a lot of nuanced work is required to get it to feel right. And if we were going to build puzzles like this one, where the player must throw an armed grenade through a high duct, throwing needed to work well. A typical VR game running at 90 frames per second will read the sensor data from the track controllers once per frame. This means the data is read every 11 milliseconds. That may seem like a short time step, but when throwing, a user can easily move their hand 15 centimeters or more in that amount of time. Additionally, the player may release the object by opening their hand or releasing the trigger at any point during their throwing motion. This makes reconstructing the act of throwing a virtual object an interesting signal processing problem. It's up to any given piece of VR software to derive the player's intent from the discretely sampled controller data, and we've learned a lot over the years about what works and what doesn't. In the lab, which we shipped in 2016, we sampled the controller's positional data every 11 milliseconds and used the sampled positions to compute the controller velocity at each time step. We then used an average Although it may seem obvious that throwing would be a trivial interaction to support in VR, a lot of nuanced work is required to get it to feel right. And if we were going to build puzzles like this one, where the player must throw an armed grenade through a high duct, throwing needed to work well. A typical VR game running at 90 frames per second will read the sensor data from the track controllers once per frame. This means the data is read every 11 milliseconds. That may seem like a short time step, but when throwing, a user can easily move their hand 15 centimeters or more in that amount of time. Additionally, the player may release the object by opening their hand or releasing the trigger at any point during their throwing motion. This makes reconstructing the act of throwing a virtual object an interesting signal processing problem. It's up to any given piece of VR software to derive the player's intent from the discretely sampled controller data, and we've learned a lot over the years about what works and what doesn't. In the lab, which we shipped in 2016, we sampled the controller's positional data every 11 milliseconds and used the sampled positions to compute the controller velocity at each time step. We then used an average of the computed velocity and direction over several frames before and after the object release to determine the velocity and direction to apply to the thrown object. Although this was functional enough to ship, it didn't always feel consistent, especially if the game's frame rate ever fell below 90 frames per second. Later, in the Index controller tech demo Moondust, we expanded on this algorithm by biasing towards higher velocity data. We also extended the SteamVR software interface to provide the controller's instantaneous velocity and acceleration data from the hardware inertial measurement unit, which is computed on the controller every 2 milliseconds. This meant that we did not have to calculate an estimate from the positions sampled by the engine only every 11 milliseconds as we had done on the lab. This was crucial to providing a more responsive feel, as it meant the throwing calculations were no longer tied to the rendering frame rate. After further experimentation, we arrived at the solution used in Half-Life Alyx, which takes 10 frames that preceded the release of the held object and averages the 3 frames bracketing the peak controller velocity in that time window. We have found that this tends to lead to a better approximation of precisely when the player intended to release the thrown object. This approach resulted in consistent, comfortable throwing, enabling us to rely on players being able to accurately throw grenades or any other objects with confidence.
This optional toner puzzle is intended to train players not to blindly click on each junction without first understanding the implications. This particular puzzle is designed to have the side effect of tripping a fire alarm if the player merely clicks on each toner junction they encounter without looking ahead. An observant player can easily solve the puzzle without tripping the alarm, but a careless player will trip the alarm, causing a Combine soldier to come storming around the corner to investigate the noise.
Last shell. I'm out. Look to the Northern Star.
I am. Why are you saying it like that?
No. The Vortigaunt said, look to the Northern Star to help his friends, which sounds like Vortigaunt nonsense, but I guess it isn't.
Oh, yeah. That does make more sense. That's some sort of Combine substation. They usually generate power and host security protocols.
Like the power and security you need for a giant vault.
Typical players spend up to 2 hours progressing through the interior spaces of the Northern Star Hotel, and we found in playtests that they often had trouble remembering their next goal of disrupting the Combine substation above. In earlier tests, the vault constantly reminded players of its presence by emitting a repeating abstract musical pattern. This pattern works so well at drawing and keeping the player's attention that we expanded and fictionalized it as a semi-musical sound design pattern, which we changed to emit from the Combine substation, representing it collecting and transmitting Vortigaunt energy to the vault. While in the hotel, the player does not have line of sight to the substation, so we repeat this sonic pattern at varying volumes within the hotel, as a reminder of both the Combine substation and the vault outside. In fact, if you at the Zen foliage when you are in the hotel, you will notice that it reacts visibly to the overspill of Vortigaunt energy as it flows from the substation. That was weird.
And the power's out. Looks like we're taking the stairs. And the stairs are out.
Let's try and get that power back on.
Okay, calm.
Three left. Three mags left. Out of shells. Out of shells.
We knew from previous VR projects that players would expect a high level of fidelity from the interactions with objects in the world, and during early testing of Half-Life Alyx, we received comments that objects were not making the sounds that players expected, given an object's material, size, and assumed weight. This led us to a more granular approach to physics sounds than we had used in prior products. For example, in the past we would have used a single physics sound for all objects of a certain size and material. So we would have had one sound to represent collisions of small metal objects, another sound for large wooden objects, and so on. For Half-Life Alyx, we built up a new library of object-specific sounds so that we could distinguish between similar objects, like a piece of silverware and a small metal can. Not only do we now have a library of almost 2,000 object-specific physics sounds, covering over 160 different objects, but we can further alter the sound at runtime based on an object's impact velocity and the hardness of the material it collides with. In some cases, we even layer in sounds representing an object's contents, such as matches in a matchbox, or fuel in a jerry can, which can be heard when those objects are shaken by the player or collide with something at high velocity.
Given the large number of bottles throughout the game, and the fact that they feature so significantly in the distillery gameplay, we decided to make interacting with them as interesting as possible using a procedural liquid effect. Each bottle is assigned a random fill level, and values for the amount of liquid agitation and foaming are calculated based on the bottle's movement. This is stored in the object's tint colour, which is otherwise unused. The shader calculates the liquid level based on the bottle's orientation in game. Since the amount of liquid visible in a bottle as a proportion of its height is different when oriented upright, sideways or upside down, different values are used for each in order to preserve the apparent volume of liquid inside. The liquid's surface is then displaced by a number of sine waves, modulated with the agitation value to create rippling waves. The areas determined to contain liquid, as opposed to air, take on the colour and refraction index values of that liquid. Bubbles and foam effects are added based on the agitation and foaming values. These are procedural and can be modified to create a variety of different behaviours. Several layers of bubbles are created in a local view space relative to the object, so that they're stable from frame to frame and can always move upwards relative to gravity. Artists can set a variety of parameters per liquid, such as colour, glow, foaming potential, wave properties, and a meniscus at the surface of the liquid which curls up around the edges of the volume, helping to communicate the viscosity of the liquid. The refracted environment seen through the glass and liquid is sampled from the same cubic environment map of the local area that's used for reflections, and so the bottles are effectively opaque and do not have to blend with the frame buffer in the way that transparent objects normally do. This was a strategic design choice, as along with storing the physics data in the tint colour, it means that the bottles can be rendered together as a batch in arbitrary order, which is critical for graphics throughput. In the end, the refractive liquid effect allows for a variety of interactions to take place at a fidelity that is especially compelling with tracked hand controllers in VR.
Here we go. Breaker boxes. Here we go.
This hotel's ancient. The wiring's gonna be a real rat's nest.
Power's back on. Let's check the elevator. Hey Russ, name a song.
Flight of the Bumblebee.
Coming right up.
That's it.
Ta-da!
back on. And up we... Looks like we're taking the ladder. This place is overgrown. How dangerous do we think this stuff really is?
Well, it is spores from another dimension, so probably, yeah, extremely. But a rare opportunity to examine alien flora up close.
Ah, ob das überhaupt geht. Lol. Geht sogar.
I'm really starting to think I shouldn't be breathing this stuff.
Agreed. Just keep moving. Maybe breathe less.
Breaching the quarantine zone revealed a new hidden secret of the city. Alien plant life from Zen has taken root on Earth and has been thriving in the shadows of City 17. On the development team, the Northern Star Hotel was referred to as Hotel Zen before it had a proper name in the story, as it was the first location we used to explore what Zen foliage could look like and how it might consume any given environment. One of the challenges the environment team faced when designing the Zen foliage was layering a new look onto an existing environment without having to rebuild Zen-infested versions of every prop. We relied heavily on texture blending and kit bashing of Zen foliage shapes to handle most of the big environmental changes when Zenifying a scene. We also added some new features to our level editor Hammer, which allowed for more creative manipulation of assets to reduce repetition. For example, we could pose certain types of meshes such as the Zen tentacles. These could be placed, scaled, stretched and manipulated to snake through an environment, giving a handcrafted look without every asset having to be built for a specific location. These elements were editable in Hammer so they could be adjusted at any time, but were baked into static meshes when the map was compiled to improve their runtime performance.
Oh, that's not good.
Müssen wir mal schauen, was das nächste Achievement ist. Was ich brauche. Beute. Heartbreak Hotel. Abi. Knopfemis. Ah, okay. Das kriege ich hin. Das kriege ich hin.
Last 4 cells. You see that? Russell? Russell!
Alyx! Come in!
The Reviver, one of the new enemy types introduced in Half-Life Alyx, arose from our observation that playtesters enjoyed searching their environment in VR much more than they had in traditional games. In addition to rewarding that desire to search with ammunition and resin, we experimented with how it could be part of fighting an enemy. We began prototyping with a fast headcrab variant we called the Runner, modifying its behaviour to run away and hide from the player after it attacked. We found players really enjoyed looking for a small, hidden enemy they knew was somewhere within a dense environment. They also liked shooting at a fast-moving enemy that was able to run under and behind everyday objects like tables and chairs. Lastly, players talked about liking the way they got to be the aggressor in combat for once, since everywhere else in the game they felt like they were always on the defensive. While feedback was overall very positive, there was one specific problem: how to encourage players to search for the Runner. After a few Runner encounters, we found players would start to realise they didn't have to look for the Runner at all, they could simply wait for it to run away and then leave the room. So we started prototyping various ways in which the Runner could become more dangerous if not found, setting up a time pressure where players had to find the Runner quickly or the situation would get worse. After some experimentation, we landed on the prototype where the Runner could revive a fallen zombie and become a new kind of foe, one that was more dangerous than a Runner or zombie. After this change, the Runner was renamed internally to the Reviver, and we began assembling the various encounters around it. It took a lot of playtesting to balance out all the various elements of the Reviver fights, because they involved multiple separate stages: combat versus the Reviver, searching for a hidden Reviver, and combat versus a revived zombie. In the end, we still didn't feel like we'd created enough of a foolproof reason for players to need to search for hidden revivers, so we turned the reviver's heart into a key, requiring players to collect it.
An enemy's animation can elicit a powerful emotional response from players, especially in VR. While developing the reviver, we learned that sometimes a character performance can have unintended consequences. In our initial reviver prototypes, we simply used a blue-tinted headcrab model with rudimentary electrical effects. The prototype was successful enough in playtesting that we decided to invest in a new, purpose-built model for the reviver, with electrical skin and improved effects. Players identified the new reviver successfully in the game, but we ran into a new problem. Players didn't want to fight it anymore. While the blue headcrab was easily identified as something dangerous, the new model was something that players had to evaluate from scratch, and they didn't necessarily see it as threatening. In fact, the animations authored for the new reviver model were interpreted by many players as friendly or even cute. Players would often approach the creature to try to pet it, or worse, refuse to kill it to retrieve the required puzzle piece, blocking their progression in the game. If they did then realize that they were going to have to kill the cute creature to proceed, they felt horrible having to go through with it. To fix this, we reauthored most of the reviver's animations, making it significantly more unsettling and menacing. We also made the reviver more aggressive by adding a jump attack if the player got too close. With these changes to animation and behavior, players once again were fighting the reviver as intended, and they no longer wanted to take it home as a pet.
Alyx, what happened?
There was like a dog-looking lightning thing.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
I killed it, and it crapped out this thing.
This is the room featured in the very first shot of the Half-Life Alyx announcement trailer. It's not an obvious choice for that use. The room is dark, not particularly colorful, and it's a pretty pedestrian corridor. Cleaning supplies and laundry baskets are not in themselves attention grabbers. But we chose this scenario because it very effectively demonstrates the excitement and tension that we thought was typical of the game. All game trailers require careful design. Conveying a game's core experience in just a few moments is tricky, even at the best of times. But we believe the Half-Life Alyx trailer had to work harder than most to meet a particularly difficult and uncommon set of challenges. We had kept the existence of the game under wraps, so shipping the trailer was going to be the first time in 13 years that Valve had shown any work on Half-Life. On top of that, the trailer had to quickly communicate that Valve had chosen to make the next installment of Half-Life a VR game. And although we were very confident in the decision to make a VR game and in the quality of what we had built, we still worried that revealing those decisions to the world might cause even our most loyal fans to make their own decision, that we had truly lost our minds. Those of us working on the trailer knew it had to make people so excited that they could put those worries aside. The trailer also had to clearly convey that the game was not Half-Life 3, meaning that it did not take place after the events of Episode 2. Half-Life Alyx was, instead, a prequel of sorts, occurring between the events of Half-Life and Half-Life 2. In addition, the trailer had to show depth, variety, familiar characters, and enough novelty and surprise to get across to the viewer that this was really and truly a full-fledged installment in the Half-Life series, not a small VR experiment or a spin-off. This was a tall order, but the entire game team rallied around the effort because everyone understood the value of the work. We're just as proud of the result we achieved in the trailer as we are of any other part of Half-Life Alyx.
Hello, Ricky. Damn, not my type game. Yeah. It scares you. Why that? It's not really a scary game.
There it is. That elevator will take me up to the substation.
Half-Life Alyx supports 3 types of player movement: continuous movement, shift teleport, and blink teleport. Early on, one of the properties of blink teleport, and to a lesser degree shift teleport, was that players would often refer to the actual mechanic of teleporting when describing their movement through the environment. I teleported to the desk, or I teleported into cover, was often how players would describe their actions, and it served as an unconscious reminder that they were interacting with a game in a specific way. To address this, we made a couple of key changes early on that significantly altered the way players recounted their movement, and as a result, pulled them further into a more convincing virtual reality. One of these changes was the visual indicator that represented the teleport destination. We swapped the abstract cylindrical indicator used in the lab for a pair of holographic feet. The feet helped provide a sense of physical presence and indicated the direction the player would face upon finishing a teleport. We also added animated feet between the player's current location and the teleport target. These feet illustrated the path the player would traverse, further helping provide a fiction for their movement through the environment. Along with the visual interface changes, we also added audio of footsteps and body movements that would play after a teleport to effectively summarize the player's movement through the space. This isn't something everyone necessarily notices at first, but it is quite obvious when it's missing or incorrect. Footstep audio transformed how players described their movement through the world, and players would often refer back to movement in the environment as walking or running, as opposed to referring to game terminology.
Alyx?
Oh,
Alyx?
ich bin runtergefallen. Ups. Da. Forza Horizon, that's a while. Ach, geht kaum.
Head crab! Head crab's on your face! Oh, thank God.
Hilf mir, meine Hand durch.
I'm okay.
It was on your face and it was disgusting.
Yeah, it was.
Forza, that's about 1 year when I last played it. So, where to jump? Here. Over here.
Shells left.
Oh, those little creatures.
2 shells left. I'm out. Last 4 shells. I'm out of shells.
Oh. So, schauen wir mal.
Compared to our traditional first-person experiences, in VR we found it was sometimes all too easy to create an intense atmosphere. This can be to the game's advantage, but it can also be detrimental in cases where our focus is on training players in some new mechanic. In intense situations, players frequently fail to notice or retain critical information, and as a result, we often had to reduce tension in areas of the game where we were introducing players to something new. The audio of the reviver here as the player descends beneath the hotel is designed to ease players into the idea that they will be encountering the creature that they had briefly seen as they entered the hotel earlier. The reviver's scream and its shadow on the wall are designed to reduce tension by indicating the position of the reviver around the corner, removing any potential surprise. Telegraphing the reviver's position and giving players the upper hand helps set up the resurrection scene, where players want to observe the reviver instead of shooting at it immediately. This is critical because this is the first time the player sees the reviver reanimating a zombie, and if players are too distracted to take it in, they won't be successful in the upcoming fight.
Mann, fuck das scheiß Ding noch. Wirklich. Ei. Just disappeared.
Last two.
Alyx, is the dog gone? What happened?
New development? It went into a dead guy.
No.
Yes. I had to shoot both of them. It was nuts, Russell.
It sounds nuts.
Oh, it was.
One of the challenges with the Reviver's resurrection mechanic was training players that the Reviver was the target, and the zombie was effectively just an inert vehicle that could not be damaged. This was a significant departure from what we had been training players to expect. Up until this point in the game, players would see a zombie, shoot at it, and as long as they hit it enough times, it would die. The Reviver breaks that expectation, and in early tests, players thought the game was broken when the zombie wouldn't die or even react to being shot. We had to make a number of changes to revive zombies to train players that this behavior was intentional. First, we designed the revived zombies' introduction animation to use particle effects and audio to draw attention to the changes that result in this new type of combat. Second, we substituted in dull particle and impact sounds to make shooting the zombie feel less impactful than it did in previous encounters with ordinary non-revived zombies. And finally, we modified the revived zombie so that it doesn't play any flinch animation or respond to bullet impacts, further communicating to players that its behavior is different. We also used the Reviver itself to illustrate the new combat experience. Electrical effects were added to indicate the Reviver's movement inside the zombie, with a bright pop and glow as it emerged at a new location on the zombie's body. With these new visuals and satisfying impact sounds and screeches from the Reviver when hit, playtesters were no longer confused and consistently enjoyed the new combat mechanic.
In our early designs, a revived zombie was just an invincible zombie with a moving vulnerable spot. Playtesting revealed this to be less tense and threatening than the Reviver on its own, and since we wanted the revived zombie to be a higher stakes adversary, we needed to enhance its offensive capabilities. As a natural extension of the electrified nature of the Reviver, we chose to create an electrical field around the revived zombie, so that players who got too close would take heavy electrical damage. This worked well for many playtests, until we observed a player who was a proficient real-world marksman. This player was able to easily defeat the revived zombie without ever being threatened by it. In response, we gave the revived zombie its electrified ground counterattack, which forces players to change positions to avoid damage. This created a cadence of attack and retreat that was more tense and satisfying for all players.
Since a VR game must always be rendered from a virtual camera that matches the player's own point of view, we have limited opportunities to control what the player sees. Elevators are one of the few tools we have in VR to direct the player's view. A rising elevator like this one can be used similar to a crane shot that you might see in film, going from one elevation to another, revealing a beautiful vista or dramatic story beat. In VR, elevator rides can be challenging to make comfortable, as the motion of the virtual elevator is inconsistent with the player's own vestibular system. We found that we can make the elevator rides in Half-Life Alyx comfortable enough for most players by moving the elevator slowly and limiting how much the player could see out of the elevator. This particular elevator was initially far more open, but we gradually introduced more and more visual obstruction to the design so that the player always had some significant portion of the elevator in their field of view. This meant that we were able to get the dramatic reveal of the hotel exterior and Combine substation we desired, but players were comfortable since they could always see the elevator, which was in their own frame of reference.
After exiting the elevator, the player gets their closest view yet of the Combine substation attached to the exterior of the hotel. While the Combine architecture can veer into the abstract, it's often at its most successful when contrasted with a human structure. Beyond this, we always try to drive the visual design with an invented function, ideally to support the gameplay or story. In this case, the routing of some unusual power source to the vault from various parts of the city. The player doesn't know it at this point, but this substation is designed to essentially torture the song out of a group of Vortigaunts who are housed in the attached pod farms. The output is collected from the Vortigaunts before being reharmonized by a single conductor Vortigaunt via the cable tuner apparatus seen at the root of the transmission cables that run up to the vault itself. This design gave us the opportunity to subsequently meet another Vortigaunt and acted as enough of a constraint to allow us to design an interaction that would physically compromise the substation as the player exits the hotel in the next map.
Det räcker då.
Almost got it. Oh wow, check it out. My gun just keeps getting better and better.
You know, Russ, technically, I don't think there's a whole lot of your gun left anymore.
I'll tell you what, let's put that idea on hold for now. We can chat about my gun when you get back.
Croissants next level. Okay, this muss man aber morgen. Spiel gespeichert. So. I'm offline for today. So Vicky, was nice to see you again after such a long time. I hope I see you tomorrow. I probably can finish it tomorrow. So we will see. Have a good night.